Hello friends, we're about to begin program 30 in the Egoic Lotus webinar book, a series of commentaries on what DK has written about the Egoic Lotus and also commentaries on my own commentaries and general speculation and examination of this important subject of the Egoic Lotus. We have finished looking at every petal in terms of what DK wrote of each one from approximately page 539 to 542. We also had some introductory material to that and some concluding material. So there's been quite an exhaustive search so far on the petals as DK has described them. Now, we have not yet examined the question of color and how that is related to what is to be accomplished in the field of experience related to each petal. Then we will get into a look at the 12 petals in summary. We will gather much of the material we've talked about and put it all together. And finally, there will be the Egoic Lotus charts, which my colleague B.L. Allison has helped me prepare, helped me get organized here, so that we will end with a look at how this all looks in chart form. For right now, we will deal with page 820 to 825 in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and see what additional things might be suggested by the discussion of the colors, and also a few other statements that DK has given for each petal. He gave very important statements starting from 539. I think, let's see if we can go there. Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and let's say 539. The 12-petaled Egoic Lotus, and he starts with, the petal of knowledge for the physical planes, for the breaking of the law, and the ensuing suffering, the price of ignorance is paid, and knowledge is achieved. It's kind of a historical summary of what is connected with each petal. So those, I think, are very valuable statements, and I have commented on them and drawn some zodiacal, planetary, and ray conclusions regarding the kind of activity that is occurring within that level of petal experience. So I'm beginning here at 820 in Cosmic Fire. It says, as we know, the Egoic Lotus consists of 3 circles, each circle being composed of 3 petals and all shielding the inner bud where hides the jewel. And the inner bud, of course, these are the innermost petals, really, the petals of synthesis. So this is for us a review statement, and we're dealing with 3 circles of differentiated energy, each circle an emanation of the central fire or nucleus within the lotus. Actually, let us say each circle, each circle is an emanation of the central fire or nucleus, essentially, but conceived and supported by the presence of the solar angel acting within the lotus as the angel of the presence. I think there are maybe different ways of looking at this angel of the presence. I have done some commentaries on the section from Esoteric Psychology 2 regarding the angel of the presence, and tried to look at those old commentaries and try to determine what may be the distinction, if any, between the solar angel and the angel of the presence. We have already reviewed names of the central fire, sometimes identified as the jewel in the lotus. So it is with the evolution of these petals that we are concerned, with their formation, their vitalization, their nurturing, and their eventual unfoldment. And I wonder if I turned, there are some more of those wonderful stages which we need to have clearly in mind when we're thinking about the kinds of things that happen in the Egoic Lotus. So this is the Egoic Lotus, the material I've been gathering. Stages of opening of the petals. And I think I could add this, TCF 820. So organized. So we can put here formation, or formed, maybe that's the term I'm using. Formed, vitalization. Now let's see, I suppose the word nurturing will come in here. Stimulated, nurtured somewhere, and eventual unfoldment. This, I think, we have to have an idea of the different kinds of processes which occur in relation to the petal, and they take different amounts of time. We cannot know the amounts of time taken, but sometimes a very long time. I mean, here personalities come and go, physical incarnations come and go. The real sign of progress is found in the condition of the Egoic Lotus after every incarnation. So, I've added those. Let us list some of the processes through which the petals pass, not as understanding. Their sequence is very important, and the last word is not said here, but something of importance is said and can be collated with other statements. So formation, vitalization of the petals, nurturing of the petals, mostly accomplished by solar fire, and eventual unfoldment of the petals. Not mentioned here is organization, which actually precedes the state of vitalization, as far as I've been able to tell. At first I didn't know which preceded which, but the further that I read and think, the more I understand that organization precedes vitalization. So we'll say, in fact, organization precedes vitalization, because vitalization is that energizing of the petal preparing for its unfoldment, and its unfoldment means, what does unfoldment actually mean? You know, let's just say I have an idea here that I'd like to put down. So unfoldment means that it is no longer necessary to work so hard at cultivating the qualities and skills associated with the petal, but that some of them, and later all of them, can be relied upon as existent. We all know there are certain things we do by second nature. They are built into us, and we can always rely upon the fact that we can do them. We don't, we're not getting into the car for the first time and wondering what is a gear shift, what is a steering wheel. They just work for us. But there was a time when we had to learn. So I would say that organizing the petals has a lot to do with learning the qualities and skills associated with the petals. At some point, this all becomes much easier and automatic, and we can rely upon a set of qualities and skills built into our nature, i.e., unfoldment. It will be useful for the student at this stage to remember that we are primarily dealing with the development of the second aspect in man, the development of consciousness. So I say here the entire Egoic Lotus reflects the second aspect in man, but especially the petals within the Egoic Lotus reflect this aspect, not so much the jewel in the lotus and not so much the three members of the atomic triangle, though they each one of those and the jewel has a type of consciousness associated with it. Vibrations and spokes, we may remember, reflect the first and third aspects respectively. Petals maybe have more to do with the second aspect, and the vision of the angel instead of the Egoic Lotus or the wheel with 9 spokes, maybe 12 spokes eventually. That can be maybe more associated with the first aspect. So we are primarily dealing with the development of the second aspect in man, the love, wisdom aspect, and are only secondarily considering the third aspect, which responds to the consciousness. This whole study of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire is actually dealing with the second aspect of fire, primarily the fire of mind or solar fire. There is some of the book that deals with what we usually call substance, and some with what we usually call spirit. But the vast majority of the book deals with the second aspect, or the consciousness aspect. I say further here that yet compared with solar fire and with consciousness in general, the Egoic Lotus is a kind of third aspect structure representing an internal environment qualified by the second aspect. I mean, it is a vehicle. It is a vehicle of consciousness. So consciousness is one thing, and the vehicle is another. But throughout the treatise, the third aspect is considered secondary. So the love wisdom aspect, and we are only secondarily considering the third aspect, that of activity which finds its energizing centers in the three permanent atoms and generates the personality. We are not dealing so much here with the three permanent atoms, or really the members of the atomic triangle, but with two permanent atoms and one mental unit, yet for convenience of speech and writing, they are often referred to as the three permanent atoms, maybe some union of the, how to spell it, of the mental unit, and the monastic permanent atom is implied. It seems that they should be getting together because they have a 3 and a 4, which would make a 7. And that would cover, within the dense physical vehicle of the solar logos, all the three levels, 3 sevens. So this would cover, within the dense physical body, of the solar logos, 21 subplanes, 3 planes with a 7-fold permanent atom at the head of each of the planes in the position of the 7th principle. So, I've discussed with you before whether when the lower atomic triangle is translated into the triad, which of the members of the atomic triangle relate to which of the triadal permanent atoms. And it's, from one perspective, it seemed quite convincing that the mental unit would relate to the monastic permanent atom. And yet, when we look at the spiritual triad and its relation to the 3 members of the atomic triangle, is it a reflection below, or is it a correspondence? And if it's a correspondence and not a reflection, then the physical permanent atom would relate to the monastic permanent atom, the astral to the Buddhic, of course, and the mental unit, although it seems strange, to the atmic permanent atom. All the triadal permanent atoms have the 3 majors, but really they are simplified compared with the structure of the 2 permanent atoms below, which are 7-fold. The 3 permanent atoms, the lower ones, are all of them a part of the structure of the Egoic Lotus, if we call them permanent atoms instead of members of the atomic triangle. Finding their place in the lower part of the lotus, which is symbolically at least correct, they are said to be at the base of the lotus. Now immediately the size and scale becomes a question, and we wonder about the real size of the Egoic Lotus relative to the members of the atomic triangle, whatever the radiation may be. So there follows here much review material, considering what we have been covering in even greater detail in our various classes and also in the commentaries. The structure, but new material is given, interestingly enough. The structure must be held, however, firmly in mind. So these 3 circles of petals are called in esoteric terminology, and I guess Victoria helped prepare this text and is color coordinating the statements. She has a great sense of color, and of course the outer tier is having to do with knowledge, and these are called lords of active wisdom. They have to do with the ray of active intelligence, that's the green ray, but since they pertain to knowledge specifically, they have much to do with the lower expression of the 5th ray, which is activated at the time of individualization by whatever means. So these 3 circles of petals are called in the esoteric terminology, and the first one is the outer knowledge triad, or the lords of active wisdom. Who are these lords? They have to be related to the solar angels or Agnishvattas. So we seem to be speaking of solar lords or Agnishvattas, who are lords or supervisors of an activity process within the general 2nd ray focus of the Egoic Lotus. Let's see. And this division of the lords relate, this division of these Agnishvattas relate to the 3rd ray of active intelligence, and thus they are called lords of active wisdom. The wisdom aspect is on the 2nd aspect, and the activity on the first, on the third. The word wisdom is to be noted, and we are not only dealing with knowledge, but it is possible to forget this, as these three petals are so often called knowledge petals. Wisdom is involved in their development, wisdom related to the dual love wisdom of the second ray, although it's hard to confine it to that because any type of being, self-conscious being, can eventually develop wisdom. Wisdom is also related. The factor of wisdom finds its affiliation, yes, with all three aspects of divinity: knowledge wisdom, love wisdom, will wisdom. Wisdom seems to be a factor related to Shambhala. The Buddha is the Lord of wisdom. He comes forth from Shambhala and communicates with the Lord of love, who is the Christ. Wisdom is in a way older in its externalization than love. You can say that wisdom is older in its externalization or expression than love, and is the part of love wisdom which is related to the hard line rays. The emphasis on its association with knowledge as here given is, however, unmistakable. So the outer knowledge triad, or the lords of active wisdom, activity leads to wisdom, love leads to wisdom, will leads to wisdom. We can say that all the three modes, knowledge, love, and will, all lead to wisdom. And the reason wisdom is emphasized is that the Egoic Lotus is primarily a vehicle for the second aspect of divinity, consciousness. Then we have the middle love triad. We're kind of using the color rose here. And of course, we remember that orange works throughout every petal of the Egoic Lotus. That is not the case with rose. Rose works through 10 petals. Well, no, that's not correct. One in the lower level of knowledge, and then, 4 times in a way in the middle tier, so that's 1 plus 4, and then 3 times in the sacrifice tier, 7 times. But not as pervasive, of course, as the orange, which is simply found in every petal and is the predominating hue of the Egoic Lotus. So these are lords of active love. We're dealing with, I think we're dealing with tiers, right? Triad, yeah. We're dealing with the way in which the Egoic Lotus is the third aspect vehicle. The Egoic Lotus is, after all, a third aspect vehicle, and thus activity is mentioned each time. The various divisions of Agnishvattas, I have that. Agnishvatta, A-G-N-S, A-G-N-S, A-G-N, okay. The various divisions of Agnishvattas are working actively within the vehicle. And they have different assignments according to the three aspects of divinity. So love is differentiated from wisdom, and in this instance wisdom is closely linked with knowledge, whereas love is less so. So the lords of active wisdom, this is interesting, wisdom and knowledge, there's also wisdom, linking wisdom with the first aspect, one can do that. But since it did precede in time the coming of love, we can understand how it might be linked with the third aspect, because the third aspect usually emerges before the second aspect does. So as knowledge, well, let's just say that knowledge and wisdom are closely linked through the third aspect of divinity. In all cases, the activity aspect is present. Devic lives which function upon the mental plane are automatically linked with activity. For the mental plane is the third plane, counting from below, and the third ray is the ray of activity. And further, these lords actively engage with the third aspect of divinity, expressing through the lunar vehicle. So we must remember that that the Egoic Lotus is a vehicle and related, therefore, to the third aspect of divinity. Then there's the inner sacrificial triad, or lords of active will. It's very interesting. See, thus far, well, what are we going to have? Let's take a look here. We're going to have active wisdom, active love, and active will. And we note that the term knowledge is replaced by wisdom. And perhaps this is because we are dealing with a vehicle which is essentially a vehicle for the second aspect of divinity. So this inner or sacrificial triad, or the lords of active will and sacrifice accord with each other, and when one wants to know something about one's spiritual status, one of the greatest questions is, what am I really sacrificing for the plan and the purpose? To determine with greater accuracy one's spiritual status and level of Egoic Lotus unfoldment, one can ask, what am I really sacrificing for the expression of the divine plan and the divine purpose? And it's a humbling question, I think, maybe, without exaggeration, to answer that. And we may discover that our motives are more inclined towards accumulation than actual sacrifice. Well, each to his own assessment. All right, so the same applies to the lords of the third tier. Activity is again especially accented. Now, when these lords take their place, in the formation of the lotus, it is located on the third subplane of the higher mental plane. So again, an activity subplane. Later it will move to a love-wisdom. Oh, no, that's not it. The love-wisdom plane. So if we list the three aspects of divinity, we find respectively, in this context at least, I mean, you know, with the Buddha, wisdom can also be associated with the first aspect, but wisdom is connected with the third aspect, and indeed, if one can transmute, we often hear knowledge into wisdom. One can and must transmute knowledge into wisdom. Love, of course, is connected with the second aspect, and will with the first aspect again. And as I say, sometimes wisdom is connected with the first aspect rather than the third. In the case of the Buddha, the Lord of light and wisdom, wisdom is connected primarily with the first aspect of divinity, but also with the third. And why is that? Because Buddha BD, Buddha, is a third ray monad. Third ray monad. So below we have a very concise description of the meanings and functions of the three tiers of petals. The first triad is the summation of experience and developed consciousness. And I think especially experience and consciousness from the world of the senses. Experience and consciousness from the world of the senses. There probably is included some astral experience is here included, divorced from the physical body, but not much related to consciousness liberated onto the mental plane. So here we're speaking of the first tier of petals. The first tier of petals deals with much outer experience in the three lower worlds. And as I say, you know, especially the physical world, petals of knowledge for the physical plane. The human being is not yet subjectively oriented, and the consciousness developed concerns primarily the life of the five normal physical senses, not the extensions of the senses. Yet the astral body and mental body are definitely growing in power and influence. They are not, however, very consciously used. They are used, as occurs when the human being can focus as a soul in incarnation knows he is the soul in incarnation. There will be astral experience during the Atlantean phase, and many of the aboriginals have this astral experience as well. How much experience there is on the mental plane as a discarnate being, I think not much. Maybe that is reserved for a later stage, perhaps somewhat in the Aryan race. The second tier is the application of that knowledge in love and service. Okay, so this grows with the intelligent participation of the man in world and social affairs. The application of that knowledge in love and service, or the expression of the self and not self in reciprocal vibration. This is so good and so important, telling us of the interplay of the interplay between the pairs of opposites, telling us of the interplay between the pairs of opposites in the hall of learning. I like that. The expression of the self and not self in reciprocal vibration. In a way we can see a kind of relation to the sign Gemini in the second tier. We can see a relation to the sign Gemini in the second tier, that reciprocal vibration between self and not self, or at least between the higher of the pairs of opposites, which we ally with the self, and the lower of the pairs of opposites, which is the personality or the not self. Such important and essentialized thoughts are being expressed. If there was any confusion about what occurs during the organization, vitalization, and unfoldment of the second tier of petals, it is clarified here. The expression of the self and not self in reciprocal vibration, eventually, shall we say, eventually the self gains the upper hand and becomes the dominant factor, emerging during the developmental processes of the sacrifice petals. Knowledge has been gained through experience during the opening of the first tier of petals. Now that knowledge and now that knowledge, which is not yet really wisdom, is expressed in love and service increasingly. Perhaps this does not occur immediately as the second tier petals are being organized. As the Tibetan tells us, the expression of love and service in this tier is still tainted by various degrees of selfishness, and instead of using the word tells us, I think it would be maybe more accurate to say, as the Tibetan suggests or infers. We do see that there is a great struggle that goes on in the fifth petal as the inner self attempts to turn from the love of the unreal to the love of the real. So I imagine there can be quite a battle between conflicting directions, one of which can be selfish to the nth degree, as is stated in relation to stage of adaptation group number 4. And Leo can be, we know, a very selfish sign. Leo, ruling the fifth petal, can express in the early, at first as great selfishness. The most materialistic, or should we say a strongly materialistic sign, potentially, victim of ahamkara. So one of the distinguishing characteristics of the second tier of petals is duality and reciprocity between the pairs of opposites, self and not self, soul and personality. It's really a when the self is finally in the seat of control, is finally in the seat of control, then we are moving through the initiations, especially those, especially the second and following. I think there's still a lot of duality going on the way to the second initiation. And, you know, maybe even afterwards, but by that time, one pretty well knows who and what is in the driver's seat and identifies with it. One then is becoming Krishna, the soul, and Krishna is actually guiding the chariot. No longer, strictly speaking, Arjuna, because one is really becoming the soul-infused personality. So, during the focus of consciousness within the first three petals, there is no sense of God immanent, of the self within as distinct from the form, and in the second tier of petals, there is. And this is, I think, really important. There may be a sense of God, but not God as self. May be a sense of God within the first tier, but not of self as God. And that's one of the big things which has to be achieved, this type of identification in the realization that the self is not other than God. Of course, those who are still under the spell of dualism as regards God will punish you for saying, I am God. But then you would have to explain what you mean, and mostly the intellect of those who is ready to punish for that infringement is not an intellect which has been developed sufficiently to understand what you might say about identification. And the third tier is the full expression of knowledge and love, turned towards the conscious sacrifice of all to the furthering of the plans of the planetary logos and to the carrying out of his purposes. So one has knowledge, one has love, and one gives it, sacrifices it for the divine plan and divine purpose. At least this is what the first and second degree initiates are learning to do. The first degree initiate and second degree initiate are learning to do this, and the third degree initiate really knows how to do this and is on the Syrian path, which is not the same as the path to Sirius, but, or this is to say, the path of Syrian initiation. And is not in danger of turning back. So the work accomplished during the organization, vitalization, you know, other words in there, nurturance, opening, unfoldment of the third tier of petals is high indeed, and unfoldment begins prior to the first initiation. To the first initiation through the strenuous and abnormal effort of the man. And this prepares him for the application of the rod of initiation, which further opens the seventh petal. And this we have discussed this, sometimes fairly rigorously, in the attempt to confirm that this is how it happens. So it is high work, important work, and forced progress. Everything about the opening of the third tier, third ray, third tier. Oh, maybe, how about this? TDT? Well, maybe I don't have that. TDT. I think I'll put that in. TDT, third tier. Everything about the opening of the third tier is abnormal and forced, and not natural or leisurely. And there are many people, I have learned, who are not really going to tread the path of initiation. They will depend upon the slow lifting of all human beings through the ongoing planetary process. They will not pass through individual initiation or initiation in small groups. They are not willing or inclined to make that abnormal and strenuous effort, a strenuous, abnormal effort. Knowledge and love are quite fully developed, and now, in the third tier, they are blended and turned towards the furthering of the plans, that is, the plan of the planetary logos, and this requires the sacrificial use of knowledge and love. So what would that be, Not knowledge just for oneself, and not love towards the things and pursuits which one towards which one is naturally and predilectionally inclined, but love of all, and not just that which one favors. One has to predilectionally, now there's a word, put it in as if it were a word, confirming this is a word. Now, we're not just moving towards what is agreeable to us. We do not love only that which is agreeable to us. And during the experience of the third tier, group consciousness comes into effect, and I want to say comes more selflessly into effect, because it's already there, somewhat, even in the early days when the first tier springs open. But it's a selfish kind of group consciousness. It's a kind of group consciousness which is cultivated for the welfare of the individual who is involved in it. So this is a truer group consciousness. A truer group consciousness comes into effect, and one consciously and willingly begins to live for a purpose beyond individual purpose, and begins to live, and I want to say unselfishly, for a purpose beyond the individual purpose. At least the initiate of the first degree is being trained to do that, and by the time we have the initiate of the second degree, there is some capability of living unselfishly. The individual is rapidly becoming he is the soul in incarnation, but let's just say the conscious soul in incarnation. Each of these groups of petals come under the definite guidance of three groups of Agnishvattas, three groups for each of the three petals, who form them out of their own substance, and who in essence are the threefold ego during its manifestation. The material of formation may be of a lower substance energy pertaining to the plane, but the substance energy of these Agnishvattas is the formative power of the lotus and works upon the lower substance energies to sort of geometrize them into the form of a lotus. Much of the functioning of the Agnishvattas is here revealed. So basically it looks like there are 9 groups. Of Agnishvattas. Okay, I know that I have that. And AGNI, AGN. All right, that's what it is. AGNS, 9 groups of AGNS, or Agnishvattas, each with its own assignment, 3 related in each one of the tiers. So we have multiple Agnishvattas. Multiple Agnishvattas. I'm going to do the right thing here. AGNS, AGNS, and AGNS. Okay, I'll put it here, AGNS, and hopefully we can avoid the capitalization which sometimes occurs, and we'll call it AG Agnishvattas. Okay. So we have multiple Agnishvattas in the Egoic Lotus manifestation, not just one. Though one great one may be the emanating source of the many. So I wonder, how many Agnishvattas? And let's make this a word that exists. How many of the Agnishvattas actually exist in the in that higher grouping we call the Egoic Lotus? So, just the way the personality is multiple, so is the ego on the higher mental plane, composed of a multiplicity of Agnishvattas. So much here about the Agnishvattas is being revealed. So each of the 3 groups of petals comes under the definite guidance of 3 groups of Agnishvattas. Guidance is an important word, and let's say the petal, an important word. The petal, oh, I see what's the problem. I have to use my bracket again. All right. So a petal is not passive, and its energies have to be directed into the lower 3 worlds. There is feedback between the power of the petal, fed also from above as well as below, and the forces within the 3 lower worlds. Well, much of this is taken care of by the Agnishvattas who know the story and how alchemically to handle themselves in order to accomplish the purposes of the lower man. The Agnishvattas form the petal out of their own substance, and let us just say, but let us not forget the actual substance of the plane or subplane itself. So the Agnishvattas shape that substance and substand it. And the Agnishvattas are, in essence, the threefold ego during its manifestation. But of course, the consciousness of the monad in its attenuated form is also there, just as the consciousness of the monad in its even more attenuated form is present in our personality consciousness, is essentially our personality consciousness. So substance, of course, is energy, and the energy substance of the higher mental plane is informed by the energy substance of the Agnishvattas, which we infer is still higher. Maybe it's, well, you know, it's basically Buddhic energy monastically mediated. The Agnishvatta is at least a Buddhic being, and there's been a lot of question as to how far the development of the solar angels actually goes. Are there other planes on which it can focus itself, or is it strictly a Buddhic being, at least in its sacrificial service? Because the energy of the Agnishvattas substands the substance of the higher mental plane, out of which the petals are actually formed, the Agnishvattas are said to be the essence of the threefold ego during manifestation. If they were to disappear, the Egoic Lotus would disappear, and the substance of the higher mental plane would simply return to what it was before in its own reservoir. So it is the essence which substands the form, and without the Agnishvattas, the substance of the higher mental plane would lose its shape and return to the reservoir appropriate to it. So the substanding, you know, let me put it like this. Substanding is shaping. That's one part of it. So there, without that shaping, forming, form-building energy of the Agnishvattas, the substance of the higher mental plane would never shape itself into the form of a lotus. So from the usual perspective, essence substands substance, yet philosophically, essence is substance. Well, we don't need to debate that too much. The one and only being can be called the substance. The one and only being, okay, one and only being can be rightfully called the substance. The only thing, the thing that substands all apparency. That which, I think I've lost something. That which substands all apparency. The one infinite being. One infinite being. And really, the only reality. So through them, presumably the Agnishvattas, flows the force and coherent energy of those mysterious entities whom, when considering the human family as a whole, we call the Buddhas or Lords of Activity. So these are the, we're learning about the Agnishvattas and that for which they are conduits. They are, I mean, every entity is a conduit. Even the universal Logos, the one and only Logos, is a conduit for what we call that, or the one infinite being. So we learn that the Agnishvattas are conduits for the flow of energy from still greater entities, every entity really is along the line of an energy flow from higher centers of energy through to lower centers. That makes sense. And we find that 3 tiers of petals are responsive to different kinds of Buddhas. With one of these categories of Buddhas, we are familiar. So the higher beings here, from whom energy flows to and through the Agnishvattas, are called Buddhas. Yes. So we're learning something about, this is Buddhist emanation theory. I begin to think that the deeper aspects of Buddhism cannot really be understood unless emanation theory is part of that understanding. So the Buddhas are lords of activity. Well, these are the Buddhas of activity surrounding Sanat-Kumara, the ones with whom we are familiar. They are what are familiarly called, I'm saying that, the Buddhas of activity. Such Buddhas operate on a globe level. They are strictly related to the activity aspect of divinity. That takes us to Cosmic Fire 873, where 3 different groupings of Buddhas, or if they're called that, sometimes they're just called higher existences, are discussed. Those that operate on a globe level, those on a chain level, and those, the highest of all, for the entire planetary scheme. And then we have the flowing through the Agnishvattas, the energy of the Buddhas, or lords of compassionate love. We do not know, I'm saying here, the location or associations of these lords of compassionate love, but we may find that they are associated with the chain level of the planetary expression rather than the globe level. That is a speculation. That page 873 is an important one. We can consult, if we do consult 873, we find 3 different orders of Buddhas, and it is these kinds which may be referenced: globe, chain, and scheme levels. Now sometimes I sometimes wonder about the, quote, esoteric Kumaras, the 3 which are out of incarnation or active relationship with the lower worlds. And I wonder if these have anything to do, well, but really, since there is rotation between these Buddhas of activity and the esoteric Kumaras, and they take each other's places, maybe they are all more on the activity aspect. But we might want to know where these Buddhas or lords of compassion locate themselves with respect to the planes. Then the Buddhas of sacrifice, obviously they're dealing with the lords of sacrifice. Let's just say dealing with and energizing the lords of sacrifice, which are the essence of the sacrifice tier. Buddhas of sacrifice, of whom the Lord of the world is to man the best exponent. So, this is interesting. We have Buddhas of activity. We have Buddhas of compassionate love, and Buddhas of sacrifice. Well, maybe the esoteric Kumaras are involved here. 3 below, Buddhas of activity, 3 above, Buddhas of compassionate love, and 1 in the center, Sanat Kumara. That is still a speculation, but they are all, these are very high beings, very high beings. It's almost as if the planetary logoi are Buddhas of sacrifice. It is almost as if the planetary logoi are Buddhas of sacrifice. And the Buddhas of activity have been planetary logoi in the past. And thus, these are very far separated in development from the Agnishvattas, or solar angels. Because it's the many solar angels together, a grouping of maybe 49 that become together a planetary logos. That's a mysterious idea. But now we're talking about these great beings from whom the energy comes to animate the lords of the petals, or the particular types of Agnishvattas which have created a particular petals. One wonders about how many of these Buddhas of sacrifice exist when compared to the number of other types of Buddhas. In relation to our planetary logos, there seems to be only 1 Buddha of sacrifice, Sanat Kumara, and he is surrounded by 3 Buddhas of activity, and also by esoteric Kumaras. And SK, it must be remembered, it must be remembered, is really the planetary logos in extension, and not really different from the planetary logos. Without emanation theory, we will not understand this. These relationships cannot be understood. Yet are Sanat Kumara and the 3 Buddhas of activity active only at the globe level, or also at the chain and scheme levels? Careful thought in this matter will show Sanat Kumara, who is essentially the planetary logos, to be active at all 3 levels. We could ask if there are different kinds of Buddhas of activity, the foremost of which surround Sanat Kumara at the scheme level. The esoteric Kumaras may also be considered a higher aspect of Buddha of activity, and this is speculation, and maybe Buddhas of love and compassion. So clearly there is a planetary multiplicity of such great lives which are graduated in a hierarchical sequence, and yet through the process of emanation they are all a part of each other, and essentially from or of one emanating source. And Victoria entered something here in the days when she was inserting some of her comments, and this shows clearly enough that the knowledge petals are made up of the orange of the lords of activity. The love petals are of the rose substance of the lords of compassionate love, and the substance of sacrifice, yellow, is provided by the lords of sacrifice, or Buddhas of sacrifice, such as the Lord of the world. If you use the 4th Kumara, the color yellow fits well. So we are learning somewhat where these colors come from. So the link between the three types of Buddhas, the Agnishvattas, and the quality and color of the petals is evident. So there is the Buddhas of activity seem to be involved in an orange transmission. The Buddhas of love and compassion, or the Buddha lords of compassionate, Buddhas of, how does it call them here? Buddhas of, or lords of compassionate love, are involved with the color rose, and the Buddhas are lords of sacrifice with the color yellow. So what is the idea behind all this? The colors of the Egoic Lotus have emanated from very high sources and are not only the result of the lesser lords, which in form and substand the petals. And I think if we went back here, we have here each of these three groups of petals comes under the definite guidance of three groups of Agnishvattas who are connected with greater entities. Through them flow the force and coherent energy of those mysterious entities, starting with Buddhas of activity, Buddhas of compassionate love, Buddhas of sacrifice. The term Buddha represents a high being. So when the term Buddha is used, it represents a very high being. Not just, the association is not just with our Buddha Gautama. Okay. Through these three groups flows the threefold energy, which on the mental plane finds its medium of expression and connection with the human kingdom in three groups of Agnishvattas, or solar petries, above referred to. So, from the high Buddhas or lords through the 9 Agnishvattas, and eventually into the human kingdom. Everything that we receive, this has to be understood, comes from higher sources. From the three groups of Buddhas flow three types of energy, which express through the three types of Agnishvattas or solar petries, and we see that there's definitely an equivalence between Agnishvattas or solar petries. Sometimes you wonder, solar angel, Agnishvatta, solar petri, are these exactly equivalent words? When we're told that solar petries are members of the council within the sun, it's another way of saying that so are the Agnishvattas and so are the solar angels. Agnishvattas and solar petries are always to be considered beings. I want to maybe capitalize that for emphasis. Beings in advance of man, and it is difficult to discriminate them hierarchically. It is not as if solar petries are in some manner higher than Agnishvattas, and we have an example of different names for the same type of entity. All the Buddhas have expressive outlets upon the mental plane. The higher mental plane, because the three types of Agnishvattas or solar petries are expressive on that plane. So we have a definite link between the orders of Buddhas and the orders of Agnishvattas. A definite link between the orders Buddhas and the orders of Agnishvattas. Okay. I think we can... Okay, let's see. All right. These groups form the substance of the three circles of petals, with the Buddhas, the energy of the Buddhas behind the formation, with the energy of the Buddhas behind the formation. And each group has also a special influence upon the particular petal belonging to their especial scale of vibrations. So all of this is mathematically worked out. The character... Okay, let's see. Have to be very careful here. Right. I think something has happened. Okay, there we go. The character and quality of the petals is all mathematically, vibrationally determined. Vibrationally determined. So these beings behind the petals, the beings behind the petals are the determinants of the nature of the petals, plus the quality which has been elevated from the lower worlds by the man. Okay, so we have three groups of Agnishvattas or solar petries who in general guide and inform the three groups of petals. The second part of the statement above suggests that each group of Agnishvattas has a special influence upon the particular petal belonging to their especial scale of vibrations. Presumably this would mean that the Agnishvattas of the knowledge petals would have an especial influence upon the knowledge petal. That the Agnishvattas substanding the love petals would have an especial influence upon the love petal, and the Agnishvattas substanding the sacrifice petal would have an especial influence upon the sacrifice petal. And each group has also an especial influence upon the particular petal belonging to their especial scale of vibration. So this influence, the influence of such a group is upon a tier, but even more especially upon a petal within that tier. Okay. Well, we see it's all in good hands, and that supervisory beings of a very high order, even of a planetary order, remembering that the Buddhas of activity were once planetary logoi. What can we say of the Buddhas of compassionate love? And even now, Sanat Kumara is an extension of a planetary logos. The Buddhas of sacrifice, maybe all the planetary logoi are actually to be considered Buddhas of sacrifice. We do remember how our planetary logos reacted to the sacrifice which our solar logos expected of him. And he turned the other way when our planetary logos rebelled. So hence on our planet we are told there is this psychology of the divine rebel. So some additional influences might be expected in relation to that petal in each of the other tiers, which accords with the nature of the Agnishvattas concerned. I mean, we have 9. So we have 9 Agnishvattas and 9 petals. And there will be a certain specificity. See, 3 similar Agnishvattas, and then for each tier, and then 1 assigned to each petal in the tier. Certain specificity in the relation of an Agnishvatta to a particular petal. And let's get our word Agnishvatta confirmed as a legitimate word. Okay. So let's just say that each group of Agnishvattas has a relation, each group of 3 Agnishvattas has a relation to a particular tier of petals, and each one of the Agnishvattas within that group is especially related to one of the petals in the group to which all 3 are related. Further, we might infer that one particular kind of Agnishvatta of the 3 influences, influences that particular characteristic petal the most. Well, in other words, they all influence a particular tier, but there is going to be one petal in the tier which is most characteristic. Knowledge, knowledge, love, love, sacrifice, sacrifice. One petal in the tier is most characteristic of the tier. Knowledge, 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 love, love, and sacrifice, sacrifice. In other words, one Agnishvatta of the group of Agnishvattas most attuned to and influencing the knowledge petals influences the knowledge petal most. And it seems that all is organized clearly, and that different petal functions are definitively apportioned to the appropriate kind of Agnishvatta. So we can say, okay, Agnishvatta, solar angel, solar Petri, it's all in good hands and well organized. The term scale of vibrations seem to suggest a key of music, and all these energies can be expressed in musical terms. Let's just say the Agnishvattas concerned express differently, express musically and according to different vibrations. And we might say the same of the 3 kinds of Buddhas. Activity, compassionate, love, and sacrifice. So there's a definite connection between solar angel Agnishvattas and planetary logoi, and also with the sub-planetary logoi, which at this point the Buddhas of activity and Buddhas of compassionate love represent. There is kind of an ascending scale here, from man to the different groups of Agnishvattas. I suppose, there's said to be, in any creative hierarchy, 7 types of form and 9 types of consciousness. So man has his own subdivisions, and then into the Agnishvatta hierarchy. And then into the level of Buddhas of activity and Buddhas of compassionate love. And finally, the Buddhas of sacrifice. Well, we could ask, and I think I did kind of ask that, are Buddhas of activity globe Buddhas? Well, this cannot be answered exactly in the sense that it's being asked. Are Buddhas of compassionate love chain Buddhas, and are Buddhas of sacrifice scheme Buddhas? There is one reason for thinking that this could be the case, but how many Sanatkumaras are there? Well, you know, right for our globe, Sanatkumara is making his appearance in relation to our globe. Can he do that with respect to every globe? And with respect to the three types of existences which operate on the chain level, what is a higher correspondence to Sanatkumara? And with respect to the scheme level, it seems to be the pure and true Sanatkumara. See, if we were to, let's say, go to Treatise on Cosmic Fire, 873, it's most interesting. And I think, you know, it needs to be read so we can understand what this is all about. The mystery of electricity has three keys, each of which is in the hands of one of the Buddhas of activity. Theirs is the prerogative to control the electrical forces of the physical plane, and theirs the right to direct three major streams of this type of force in connection with our present globe. These three streams are connected with atomic substance, out of which all forms are constructed. Very advanced work. In connection with our chain, there are three mysterious entities, of whom our three Pratyeka Buddhas, Buddhas of activity, are but earth reflections. And there's the emanation idea, earthly reflections, who perform a similar function in connection with the electrical forces of the chain. In the scheme, the planetary logos also has three cooperating existences. So, mysterious entities and cooperating existences who are the summation of his third aspect, and who perform, therefore, work similar to that performed by the three aspects of Brahma in the solar system. So, you know, we would go on even to include on the map that we have the three that relate to the solar logos. Here are the Buddhas of activity here, with the missing esoteric Buddhas or esoteric Kumaras. Are there missing, in a way, these could be called like solar Kumaras? Are there three more esoteric solar Kumaras? Anyway, we see how interconnected the whole matter can be. So, and I've kind of asked, we obviously have globe Buddhas, chain entities, and scheme cooperating existences. Globe Buddhas, chain entities, chain mysterious, let's get that right, M-Y-S, mysterious entities, and scheme cooperating existences. Where does Sanatkumara fit in all those? Is he represented in every one of the three that is possible? 7 groups of 3 on the globe level, if we forego the idea of the inner globes, and 7 groups of mysterious, well, let's see, wait a second. It's 7 times 7 is 49 globe Buddhas. And actually, if we really look at it, every chain would have 21. So it would be 3 times 49 if we talk about distinctive Buddhas. But if we talk about the groups of Buddhas of activity, then we're going to have 49 on the globe level, 7 on the chain, 7 groups on the chain level, with what corresponds to Sanat Kumara, and simply 3 cooperating existences on the scheme level, which we can presume is the real home of Sanat Kumara, but maybe we have to call him the planetary logos. Maybe he's only Sanat Kumara when considered as an emanation of the planetary logos, who is talked about as working with 3 cooperating existences. So, for the sake of clarity, we might tabulate the various petals so that the student may get a clearer comprehension of the conformation of his own causal body and some idea of the various triangular relationships. So now we get into the details concerning each petal, again from a different perspective. And much has already been said, both in the earlier commentary that we took from, it's section 5 and subsection 9, and that was where our work was being done from page 536 to 549, and in the detailed papers prepared during the 7 in-person Cosmic Fire classes. Yes, there was a time when 7 were operating. So we have to study that which is given in order to understand our own causal body more specifically, and also something of how the science of triangles applies to the dynamics of the Egoic Lotus. And I think this is maybe a good place to say that this is the end of Egoic Lotus webinar commentary, program 30. And we've been working on page, it's 1 hour and 32 minutes, and it's 8:20 to 8:22, 22, and we will begin here with Egoic Lotus webinar commentary program. Oh, this is program 30. I said 30, but probably about 20. Program 31. And it'll be right here on page TCF 822. He's coming back to the subject, isn't he? It's very interesting. He's coming back to our subject. He didn't really discuss the color so much, nor did he discuss some of the statements he's going to offer about each petal below. We will see how that works. I think we're about, roughly 1/3 done with this particular document. So we will continue with this document, which begins to work with the various tiers of petals, shortly. And this is about 1:33. 1 hour, 33 minutes. Okay, see you soon.